What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Do note that I was the 2018 Innovation Award winner, handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And this is the place for Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations. And as you know, I always like having new friends come on the platform. And we have a new one tonight, another new one. And actually, I have to thank Lisa Blacker at one of the platforms that I share my content on, the Good Men Project, for introducing me to this outstanding young gentleman, Mr. Ross Victory. So let me introduce you via a little bio about him. He is an American marketing professional, travel and adventure enthusiast, and author of a new memoir, Views from the Cockpit, The Journey of a Son. And that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. He's a millennial, born in the late 1980s in the land of low riders, taco trucks, and celebrities. I love it. I love that. Just there in itself, I could just stop right there. But there is more. In Los Angeles, Cali, LA, also known for its income disparity and increasing homeless population. Very important. And I was listening to a story about that this morning. As a son of public servants, a missionary father, and a law enforcement mother, inspiration through exploration, community, and service come natural to him. He serves as an associate board member for Covenant House in Hollywood and spends his free time there, traveling, writing, and advocating for Meals on Wheels and Shower of Hope, among other local social organizations. And I'm aware of both those organizations, and they're outstanding. You know what? I'm not actually going to stop the rest of that because we're going to cover that in the conversation.
Okay.
I will get to another part of his bio saying he incorporated this feedback to write nonfiction and fiction projects with depth and precision, stories of captivating, complex characters expressed in all their dimensions, usually on a path to self-discovery and harmony. Likes great music, great characters, balance, simplicity, and complexity. He went on to teach abroad in South Korea. We'll get to that, which married his love for international travel and language. He received his Bachelor of Science or his BS in Business Administration and Marketing Management from Cal State in LA.
Yeah.
So, welcome for the first time and hopefully not the last time, Mr. Ross Victory. How are you?
Thank you so much, Dr. Vibe. I am in the vibe. I'm ready. Thank you for welcoming on. I'm excited.
Well, this is a good thing. And before we go any further, I'd like to welcome on the Get Vocal platform already Luke, my man from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and Big Bad Brad. Thank you guys for jumping in. You know, as always, if you want to take a seat or you want to make comments, you are always welcome. And this is going to be another epic conversation. In fact, I host nothing but, let me just put it down. I host nothing but epic conversation. Just right. Let's make it happen.
Right.
So I could have read more of your bio, but let's find out some background about you. Young man, growing up in Cali, what was life like?
Life was like, well, I was born in Inglewood, to be specific. So Inglewood's right next to LAX. And, I think I had a decent upbringing. My parents worked hard. My mom was a law enforcement. Dad was also in law enforcement, doing missionary work. And, they provided for us. We took family vacations. Both of my parents made a lot of effort to make sure me and my sister were educated. We could, speak properly, write properly. And I think it was just, average, but I know that there was some magic, but also some terror, that happened during those years. And what I mean by terror, I know that was kind of a strong word, emotional and mental opportunities, let's not say terror, that occurred. But I think it was great. My upbringing was magical and hurtful at the same time. I don't know if that even makes sense. They coexisted.
Hey, that, you know what? It makes sense.
Mm.
How was life like growing up with two parents involved in law enforcement?
While that was happening, I didn't really understand, the energy and all of that stuff that was happening, but it was very regimented, very disciplined. So my dad was also in the military. He was also a preacher and a pastor. So you can imagine there was a lot of constraint in the house as far as waking up on time, making sure your room was clean, making sure you spoke properly, making sure that your clothes were always ironed and ready. So a lot of that stuff is good stuff, but I guess sometimes with kids, it doesn't really give them the space and sometimes the noodling around that they may need. So yeah, we're very disciplined. Many times my dad was waiting over my bed when I woke up, talking about, why are you sleeping?
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Did you feel you were not a son, but maybe in the military?
Um, that's interesting. I felt I was definitely a son, but I mean, there wasn't moments that I think other people had in their childhood. I mean, they tried. Like for a year, my dad arranged this thing called family home evening, where it was like a compulsory family time, just because everyone was so busy and busy with activities. So we sat down at the table and we either had a conversation, we did an activity, we just ate together. So there were moments like that, but there was also just a lot of discipline, showing up, make sure that your that your face that you showed the world was ready and presented strength and everything that it needed to. So my last name is Victory, right? So there was also some idea that, hey, you have to be the best at all times, and this is what the best looks like: discipline.
Mm, mm. Did did you always accept and not? Did you ever push back?
Um, I did push back in my own way. I remember there was one incident where my dad was really he was talking out of opinion. Eighth grader, just asking me to do something. I was like, man, you are something like, I'm not going to do that. I wish you would just be quiet. Something I challenged him. And that one time I tested his authority, that was our one kind of encounter. Um, I don't want to say physically, he didn't hit me or anything, but he kind of grabbed my shoulders and told me, watch who you're talking to and don't ever do that again.
Wow.
So I kind of learned that when I pushed or, tried to test the boundaries, even with stuff like religion, which we'll talk about later, which is a part of the book, it wasn't well received. Even if I was using, logic and calling people out in the gaps of, what I saw to be happening, I learned kind of early on, I think at 14, 12 years old, hey, maybe this isn't the guy to do that, as well as my mom. So I didn't really have, that freedom to kind of challenge and explore, at least outwardly. I perceive that to be happening.
It says in your bio here you had, I guess, a passion for collecting pens, notepads, and interviewing yourself.
Yeah. So when I was in Japan, I did a homestay program. And at the time, Japan had pens, every brand, every color. And so I was just obsessed with collecting these pens. I don't even know if I used them, what I used them for. But I just had tons of pens and notebooks. Every time we went to CVS or any of these Rite Aid places, I always wanted a notebook. It's like, don't you have enough notebooks? But I was just taking all this stuff in and always speaking into a recorder or singing into a recorder. So I always was interested in, I guess, expressing myself. I didn't know what any of that meant, of course, but looking back, it's very clear, this guy, he likes to write. He likes to be in stories. He likes to communicate. And so, I was obsessed with pens for many years.
Was the need to express yourself because maybe the lack of attention you were getting from your
Um,
parents, or is that coming from there?
um, I'm still trying to figure out if that's the source of all of that. I do know that songwriting for a long time was very therapeutic for me. I didn't even know, because the idea of therapy and mental wellness and illness, those were not things, that was discussed. But looking back, songwriting was a safe place, for me to kind of express the need for love or express pain or, all of these things. And so I don't want to say that I was doing those things to kind of escape the emotional kind of isolation, because I do like to write. That is my interest.
Hmm.
But I do think that they went hand in hand a little bit.
How did you end up in Japan, and what was that experience like?
So my parents love to travel. So my dad, missionary, and definitely wanted me to have a open sense of the world, of what was happening out there, and to you learn about cultures and languages. So that particular trip, my parents signed me up for a homestay program. So our school did student exchange, and so we had a student come over, and then the next year I went to live with the family in Japan. And so that was in the 90s. And as you can imagine, I was the only little black kid in the group, all right, which is a normal occurrence. But at that age, 12 years old, it's so, they were doing things which I appreciate and love them to death for, to kind of expand my worldview, right? To just show me that LA is not the center of the world. There is no center of the world. There's all these other places and all these other people. And so to be open. And so that's how I got to Japan. And after that, it was just, country after country, year after year.
What did you learn from being able to travel to so many different places at a young age?
I learned that, and this is kind of strange, because when I consider the discipline and even the mental or the religious rigidity of my parents, I just learned that there's many ways to get to the top. There's many ways to express love. There's many ways to seek. And what I mean by that is different religions, from China, Buddhism, and all these places. Everyone's searching for the answer, right? We all share the same kind of basic human needs. And it's unfortunate that these lines called countries, create so much chaos. And so I really did feel that every country I went to, it's like, wow, they do it like this. Wow, they do it like this. And so it's just like, okay, what is the answer? The answer is just to exist and to search and to be.
Nice, nice. Let's get down to the book. And
Okay.
it's a powerful book. I haven't had a chance to read it, and I said the word yet, but
Yeah.
we will get to it. The Views from the Cockpit: The Journey of a Son.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the title?
So the title Views from the Cockpit is a metaphor for perspective, first off. It's looking at your life from the highest point, a plane, being able to see everything. And also there's parallels to turbulence that planes experience, turbulence that we experience in our lives. There's also joyful moments, when you're soaring, you hit, 500 miles per hour and there's not a bump in the sky. So the first part is perspective. The second part is when I was a really little kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old, part of our bonding time, me and my dad, we would go out to LAX and watch airplanes land and take off. And so we did that Sunday after church. We had the cooler with ices and, sandwiches. And we would just sit out there. It felt like for hours. It could have just been 30 minutes. Little kids, time is an elusive concept. But we just watched the planes land and wondered where they were going, wondered about the people on board. And so that was an interesting way to kind of group in the message I wanted to communicate to readers about perspective, but also a personal memory that I shared with my dad. So I added the journey of a son piece after that.
Why did you decide to write it?
So this book came about, it started as journal entries. My dad was a big journal person, always write, 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 Russ, keep a journal. And I didn't understand, when you're a snotty teenager, snotty nosed teenager, being rebellious or trying to test the limits, as I shared, you don't really understand what a senior man is trying to do or show you. But I've always been a journal person or songwriting. So when I learned my dad was on the last stage of his prostate cancer, I started just journaling more and more. In addition, I enrolled in proper therapy, but I just wrote to myself, "This is how I'm finding my dad. This is how I'm feeling." Because I could just feel internally that if I didn't get right, this was going to be one of those moments where I could lose myself. And I think at the time, I was learning to love myself enough to care, to do all these things. But it started from journal entries over time. And my mom and people in my network, I was telling them what was happening. And my mom was actually the one who said, Ross, you have something to say. This is a book. You may not be able to see it yet, but, you can write. And then all of a sudden I was like, what, is this a book? So I went back, started reading the journal entries, putting structure to it, pulling out my narrative plot structure. How does that happen? How did we get here? And all of that in and of itself was extremely healing because it forced me to deal with the real life events that had occurred as well.
What made you start trying? Was it a decision process? Did it take long to say, I'm going to write this? And when did you say, okay, I'm going to go on this journey, try this? Because you had this childhood, and obviously there's a number of things that were resonating inside of you. What made you take that next step to write this?
So part of my bookmark in the book, I don't know, it looks like there's a lot of contrast. First word is love. I kind of called them out: love, legacy, and progress. And so, again, my dad was big on legacy. And so I don't know if I was just being creative because I'm already in a storytelling place, right, with songwriting and journals. And I legitimately felt that if I wrote about my dad, that would be a way for him to live on in a different form. So that kind of pushed me and motivated me also to complete it. Hey, my dad's not here physically anymore, but what if I kind of level up my thinking, put all of this experience and his life and everything that we shared and exchanged and learned in a book form, so then it can itself spread its wings, in the world, and he can live on in the minds and hearts of other people. So that part came last, and it took a while to get there. But finally, after the journal entries, I said, wow, this is an opportunity for him actually to exist in a different, way.
Okay, I'll save that question for later. I was going to ask something, but I think it's better to do later on.
Yeah.
Was it a hard thing to start writing it?
Absolutely. So the organizing of the journals, because sometimes I write journals and then I never see them for years again. But when I look back and I, for example, found my dad, well, one of the opening sequences in the book is I found him in his bedroom, kind of being roughed up by his third wife. He was covered in urine and diarrhea.
Wow.
And so that kind of stuff, it was hard for me to read the journal entry, but I also just wanted to tell the truth, right? I think this is a life. This could help someone. This is helping me. I can't dance around any issues. I got to call it what it is, because on the other side of that, I was learning that there's peace and acceptance. I just had to put it out. I want peace and acceptance. It's painful. And sometimes writing, it was unbearable to type the words. I mean, I would just sit in my room, music, just crying, because I had to confront this, but that was the purpose, if you know what I mean.
Understood. Understood. Um, hmm. That's and I appreciate your transparency because I know it probably at times was very, very challenging and very, very trying.
Yeah.
Um, what kept you going during the writing process?
Uh, that it was very difficult to do it. So it took about, and I say 2 years from the first journal that I could find where everything was escalating. But it was hard. I mean, for many times, this book, as a manuscript, it sat, uninspired under my sofa for maybe 2 months, 3 months. There's a lot of self doubt to overcome. Like, you know what, a book is too hard. No one's going to read it. You don't have any professional experience, in book writing, and so those were a lot of challenges that I had. But again, going back to the journal entries, it's like, man, trying to cope with my dad. What can I do? And I'm just going to write a book. And there's also another layer to this book as far as fraud and elder abuse that occurred
Wow.
in his end days with his third wife and this pastor. And so I have to be honest with you, a lot of the motivation came from exposing those people, not, directly in a way that would jeopardize their health or livelihood, even with the appalling things that they did. But I felt a lot of energy to expose things that had happened by people who associate themselves with authority and righteousness. So then it's that layer too. So it was a lot of energy that led to the completed project. And it's amazing. Sometimes, I don't even believe that I actually finished it. I don't know if that makes sense, but when I think of myself, it's like, wow, dude, when I look in the mirror, it's like, you actually did this,
Right. Just want to, though I haven't read the whole book, I've read excerpts. Can you shed light in regards to the relationship you had with your grandmother?
Yeah, so my grandma was a strong woman. And I mean, yeah, I, she lived to about 80 plus years old. I mean, grew up in the South, multiple life-threatening illnesses, just overcame each one. Wasn't healthy, didn't exercise, all of that stuff. And it was her spirit that I now know that kept her alive. But as a little kid, my grandma was very rigid with religion. And I do remember one instance where we would go to church, like 7 days a week, it felt like. And her people at her church of the Pentecostal kind of traditional background would jump up and down speaking in tongues. And as a little kid, with a wandering mind, you're looking at this and I'm like, what is the purpose? So, this is a little kid. Like, what are these people doing? That's not a language I can't understand. Some people do it more than others. The people who speak in tongues are getting the, better treatment. What is going on? So one time I told her, Grandma, people don't have to speak in tongues to go to heaven. And I just felt like I had to say that because what she was doing or what I felt she was doing was making it seem like she knew the answer to something that was supposed to be bigger than us. And I called her out on that. And she was really offended. She called my dad, talked to him. How could, you allow him to say such a thing? But that's the kind of stuff I was talking about. When kids are curious, instead of, engaging in this in an adult way and, maintaining it or containing it, she shut it down. So yeah, she very, I love her. She was definitely my grandma, somebody who I lived up to and who has impacted my life for sure, but definitely very disciplined, strict, no hugs. She's one of the people you try to hug her and she, push away. We don't do hugs around here. So, very strong, but also maybe emotionally disconnected, I guess, as a little boy, and not willing to show um, compassion and care to kids who just have questions. It's not coming from an evil place. It's just, you're getting used to being out here. But I love her, and I still think about her all the time. I have dreams about her all the time. But she was something else for sure.
Good stuff. Big Bad Brad is saying, coming from a traditional Pentecostal background, I agree, Ross. So he feels you. He hears you. He hears you. Then if you didn't get love from her, who did you get your love from when you were growing up?
Um,
Or did you get any love? Maybe that's a better question.
yeah, did I get love? And that is something I was speaking to one of my good friends about maybe 3.5 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks ago. We were talking about childhood love. So I know in my heart, of course, my parents love me. I couldn't even start to say anything else. I do think the emotional connectedness, there were opportunities to be emotionally engaged and in tune with the needs of a sensitive child. People who are creative usually are feeling the world more, they're feeling it maybe stronger or different than other people do. And I feel like had my parents been able to identify that and to know that, they would have been able to provide the emotional support. But my mom, she's supported my education. She supported literacy. My dad gave me memories and travel and experiences. So I know that they definitely did love me, but did they provide the emotional support to a sensitive child? Definitely not.
Mm, tough.
That's tough, and it's real. And I'm learning. I'm 33, so I'm learning to stand and feel that realness. Because if we try to dance around it, no one's going to get better. No one listening to it is going to have a takeaway. But I owe it to myself, owe it to you, to the people watching, to listen and listening. To just keep it 100, because there's billions of people in the world. Not everybody's getting what they need, but everyone feels alone. Like what is that? You know what I'm saying? So here I am. I experienced that, and I'm living in the truth and trying to get better.
Good stuff. Share about the relationship with your father and mother. It seems at times it was quite challenging.
Mhm.
And what effect did it have on you?
So my parents, they met. I think it was a lot of serendipity in how they met. They met in an elevator in a courthouse. Yeah, my mom, she was in her 20s, dressed to impress, young from Compton, just on it, just one of those people who, you know, you see her and you think, okay, she's here to win. My dad, he was, mid 30s, and he saw her newly divorced. And so they met in the elevator. He came down to her floor, put in words to her supervisor to try to set up a meeting. That's how they met. They spent the first 5 years traveling the world. I mean, I've seen hundreds of photos of what they did, just moments of bonding, so they had that. And then all of a sudden I came. And then my sister came 4 years later. And I honestly think that my dad and his generation he expected a woman to be and behave in a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
he didn't account for the growth or my mom's life journey as maybe her personal dreams. And I'm saying this just from watching them. I'm not in their mind, right? But from my perspective, as my mom became more and more successful and kind of found her stride in life and as a Black woman in America, I think my dad started to feel challenged, his male ego, whatever it was, he started to feel challenged by the success of his wife, who was a Black woman. And so because of that, I think he started to resent her, and, made actions and moves to finally get a divorce. And so I'm still trying to figure out what that means to me. Is it scary? I mean, why would she be scary? Why would you feel challenged if this is the same person that you met in the elevator by chance? You see what I mean? So I don't know. I'm still working on that as far as what it means to me. But that's what I saw. I saw a lot of good moments. I saw my parents really care about each other and be joined at the hip in a lot of stuff. But I also saw my mom kind of reach that level to where the conversation just changed, and it became, okay, you think you can do life without me? Then I'm out.
Hmm. What effect did the relationship have on you back then, and what effect has the relationship have on you now?
Yeah. Back then, I think I was drunk at the party. That's an expression. I was drunk at the party, like most people. I was blind. I didn't know what was happening. I accepted it as normal. I remember one time a university professor. We were in a psychology class. They asked the class to talk about anger. How does your family process anger? And to give experiences of your parents and what they do when they're angry. And I remember going back and I said, you know what? I've never seen my parents angry. I've never seen them, hot and just, burned to the core about any issues. Then I started thinking, okay, well, have I seen them cuddling and kissing and loving? Okay, so I haven't really seen too much of that. Are they robots? I remember thinking that because I was in college at the time. And even as a young kid, I wasn't thinking. I was drunk at the party. But now when I look back, obviously there were some robotic moments. They were probably dealing with their own emotional scars and hurt they were in fact dealing with their emotional hurt and scars from their own childhood and trying to cope with it in this relationship. And that's not something that I want for myself. I want to be true, to not be afraid to express and experience and to feel. I want my kids to know that emotions do not make you weak. They make you human. Maybe even through emotion, you can find strength to overcome things. So right now, that's where I am. But I do remember, that assignment about anger, which kind of started to reveal the emotional part of the emotional neglect, really.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Probably robots. Luke said probably robots.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm jumping a little bit back and forth all over the place, and I hope you can work with me here.
Sure.
Was there any time during the writing of the book you felt like quitting and not writing it?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that I said that definitely pushed the envelope. But like I said, I'm 33. I've lost my dad. I've lost my brother, which I talked about,
Wow.
my older brother. Yeah, from my dad's first marriage within 4 years. And I said, so, yeah, if we're going to all these funerals and we're seeing how people kind of fade away and degrade, what do I really have to lose? Is death is that it? So I think that writing this book kind of just helped me realize that, anything is possible. Don't be afraid. Step out in faith. There's a lot of stuff. And back to your question, I did want my mom to be the first read of the book, just because, as I'm saying, a lot of things were critical. A lot of things maybe she didn't know. Wow, I did. If you would have said as a 10-year-old kid that you needed more, I would have given you more, which doesn't make sense. But I wanted her to read this to kind of get a sense of what my next chapter of my life was going to be about, which is feelings, being emotionally in tune. And she has remarried, and she's also making steps in doing the same thing for herself. And I think that she got the point of why I wrote the book and can relate to, hey, I want that freedom for myself as well. So I think, now that it's out, I think we're in a good place, and it was definitely challenging, but I'm doing my best.
I didn't get a chance to say before, but my condolences on the loss of father and brother.
Yeah, thanks.
Did your father know that you were writing the book?
I told him, I told him that I had started therapy to cope with his inevitable loss. I did tell him that, I was thinking about writing something. And so maybe I should have said that my dad was a published author. He wrote a memoir about my grandma. So you see what I mean? Yeah, this is the kind of
legacy.
This is the whole thing. So he wrote about my grandma and her strength, and he wrote some other projects. So he wouldn't have been surprised, and probably would have recommended, he would have probably recommended, yeah, you better write. This is what I do,
Do you regret not telling him that you were writing this?
Maybe, because, he wasn't, the criticisms of his wife, his third wife, the criticisms of the church and all this stuff, he was still very stubborn. So he wouldn't want to hear any type of criticism, even as, cancer took him over. And by me revealing or saying, hey, I'm writing a book, and it's going to be critical of all these things that you lived your life on, I don't know if I regret that, just because he was in a very painful place. And I think by me saying that I plan to be critical on my own healing process, I don't know if that would have helped. I wish he could have read it after the fact. I think he would have loved it, and he would have cheered like, hey, that's my son living in his truth. That's what I want him to do. That's where I am now. But at that time, I can't really sense what he would have thought about it, just because any type of criticism about his situation, he was really very, he could be verbal with criticism.
So how challenging was it to be writing this book and your dad suffering through cancer?
That was difficult, but I mean, since it took a form of journal entries, at that point, there was no title or any kind of, narratives or anything at that point. So at the time, it was just kind of interacting with my dad, go back to my computer today, his wife said this, or, I found him in the room, he could barely stand up, or I had to change they have these potties in the room, and there had been an accident. So, today I had to do this, or today we went to the radiation. So it wasn't in the form of a book quite yet. It was still journal entry, raw type of journal entries. And then later, as the title came and my intention came, it was also painful to readdress that stuff, but definitely necessary for the peace and everything that waited on the other side.
Do you remember when you finally finished the book? And also, do you remember when you received the first copy of the book?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I remember all of that. I mean, I remember having a manuscript, asking, contemplating writing an editor, okay, then making the payment to the editor, getting the feedback, like, okay, did this person like it or not? But, this is my actual life, and I don't know if I care if you like it, but then I want you to like it. It was just a lot. And then when I got the final edited copy, I just sat and I was like, this 7-year-old kid did this. Wow. I was just kind of like, man. And then when they sent the actual proof in the mail, it was just, I think I sat for about an hour, like, what the hell did you just do? What what did you just do? You know what I mean? And then seeing it in the bookstore, I mean, this is all kind of recent as far as maybe about 5, 6 weeks ago. It said local authors at a bookstore in Pasadena. It was local authors, and my book was under there. And I was just like, man, what more proof? What more proof do you need that everything is happening as it should? I really felt that way. I don't know if it's true, but I feel like, hey, your dad, as much as all this turmoil, okay, you didn't get what you need, but look what you did get. You see what I mean? And so for me, I think it was just magic, and it still feels like magic. And I still don't know what's happening with all of this as I meet people like you who have platforms and intention to share stories with the world. People like Lisa, just people in my own circle who have reached out about this book. One man revealed he had cancer during a dinner with my mom, just from the notion of me writing a book and what had happened. He revealed and said, I've been hiding something from my family. I have cancer. I do not want them to experience the shock and the pain. So those types of moments, they're surreal.
Wow, that is very powerful. If the book comes out, what does your mother think? Has she read it?
She has read it, and she, I told her, there was some fiction mixed in, and there's some fiction mixed in, and there's some exaggerated descriptions. And she said that she felt like she was reading parts of her life. She said she got a lot of revelations about what had happened in the childhood. She laughed, she screamed, she cried. She had moments for herself as a mother, reflective moments as a mother, and, trying to do the best for her kids. And I just wanted to make sure that she knew that my intent wasn't to hurt or to attack, but just something that I needed to do to cope with my father's loss. And she's been very supportive. She's on the repost. She's, promoting and giving books away, from the book side.
Oh, no.
Yeah, from the book side. But from the content side, I think that we are making steps to be able to talk like that in person and kind of drop these roles of parent and child and kind of vibe as humans. So I'm happy about that. Little by little, because, as I mentioned, law enforcement family, there's a level of emotional disconnectedness that you have to have in order to do those jobs effectively, unfortunately. So I understand that situation, but there is positive momentum, I think.
Father-son relationships. If you look at your own compared to what you see on the landscape today when it comes to father-son relationships, what are your thoughts?
That's deep, because I can only speak, my truth and speak for my sensitivity levels and how I interpret things. And I know part of what we're talking about is the absence of father. So both of my parents had absent fathers. My dad, by no choice of his own, his stepdad kind of kept his real dad out of the picture, which would be my grandfather. My mom, I think he died and was living out of state when she was young. So I do recognize that people are in situations to where they have no reference point. There is not a mental reference point of having a father, or what that is like, or what that could be like. And I do understand that my dad, even with his flaws, gifted me his life and his experiences, the good and the bad. And some of them, they did cause me pain. Is that because I'm sensitive, creative? Is that because I can't see or I don't understand that I had his physical presence? Those are important questions, but I can only speak for my journey. And I encourage people to speak about their experiences, their absence. And I do realize having a physical body doesn't make you present, right? Just because the person's there doesn't mean they're adding value to your life. It may be better if that person is removed from the picture, if they're not lifting you up and feeding your soul what it needs. But I also feel like there are people also who are physically present who have flaws that impact others in negative ways. So I would be coming from that angle, but I'm thankful for my dad for everything he sacrificed for my life. I don't take it lightly. And people who don't have a reference point and seek and yearn for a reference point, like my mom and my dad do, I know that that is a different kind of pain. And I don't want to compare pains and compare sufferings. I just encourage people to live in their truth, take the step of courage to speak their truth, write their truth, and know that you're not alone. But I do realize, I was blessed just to have his example in many ways.
Good stuff. I just want to shout out on the Periscope platform, Amelia. Thank you for following the conversation. Do you get the opportunity to talk about father-son relationships with any of your friends?
Yeah, I just had a very interesting conversation last weekend about a guy whose father had also passed away. And we were just he was more 6-7 years in the loss process. And we were vibing just about, our dads and their quirks and what kind of men they were. And he told me he says he can actually remember the day that he didn't, or the time period that he stopped thinking about his dad daily. And for someone like me who attached his memory to a book, and I think about him every day, there's just so many things like, the questions of life, who's going to be my wise counsel? But he told me that time does heal. So, you took one step to write this book, that's healing. But also, as you get farther and farther away from the event, there will come a time to where you're not thinking about your father and the loss of your father. And so I thought I really valued that input from someone. We've never talked about it on that level. Just to know that there's some point in the future that may happen for me was very promising. And of course, I have friends. A lot of them have, fathers who ain't, haven't seen them, no relationship, egotistical, stubborn people. So when I hear that, I'm like, wow, maybe should I shut up? Like, do I need to be quiet? This man gifted me all these traveling opportunities and all this stuff. But like I said earlier, I can just speak my truth, right? I can't compare suffering. I don't know what it's like to not have a dad. This is the man that I had. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, this is something I've been talking about with a lot of my male friends lately and their fathers, just to see if there's something that I'm missing.
And it builds a point on me because I'm very blessed to work with men and fathers. And I want to get your take on this statement. I always say that one of the most significant parts or moments in a man's journey is when he loses his father.
I agree with you. I deeply agree with you. I feel like that is a very emotional moment. And I'll tell you what I've experienced. So my dad, very worldly person, he always had advice, always willing to give examples. And I do sometimes now even search my email, some questions that pop into my head with how to handle different storms or different, weirdness that pops up at work and, as I navigate the world. And I try to search my email for his words or his encouragement. My barber recommended to me as my dad became more and more bedridden, he's like, hey, you got to record him, record his voice, record his image.
Yep.
And I never heard anything like that before, but I did listen. And so I'm glad that I have those tapes, that audio, and the emails that I have. But it's a huge moment because I think life is calling you out as a man. Like, hey, there's no more reference point now. This is your time to level up, to step and use everything that you know and define what this is for yourself. And that's very hard because, as a son, your dad is the example. I mean, the good and the bad, you can only reference him. And so now I don't have that. And I can only trust that I have the examples and the words and the audio and, the confidence in myself to kind of move forward without him. But I look through my emails for quotes and just topics. I'm still doing that.
If you're comfortable, what questions have you been looking for in the answers for in your notes, or what would you like to ask your dad if he was still with us today?
I would, yeah, that's a rough one because sometimes I look just to hear his voice. So, when you read someone's writing, you can almost hear their voice, and how they say it. But a lot of job troubles I've been having lately. He just had the excellent career advice. So stuff like that, I try to dig for. Right now, I would probably want to tell him that, Dad, I can see you clear as a man. I wish that we could have shared moments as men together. Just as men, because you're always fighting this dynamic of status, right? Okay, I don't want to piss my dad off. I want him to look this way, but I wish that I could have said, Dad, I see you. I forgive you. All of this stuff that happened with my mom's divorce and with your wives and these horrible decisions and all of this emotional neglect. It's okay. I understand that you were on a journey that was separate from mine. And I wish, I could say it directly and explicitly to him like that. But I do also believe in my own developing faith that he can see that through the release of this book and energetically be in tune. Like, hey, Ross, I know that you see me. I see you, and you have my support. That's what I'm trying to hold on to.
Just further on to that, and thank you for your honesty from the heart. If you gave your dad your book and he read it, what do you think he'd say to you?
So when my dad would be irritated or concerned or angry or moved even, he would, I can just see his movement. He would take off his glasses, probably close the book, and, have to just sit in silence to soak in, what had happened or what had been communicated. So I provided many opportunities for him to do that just because I was always fighting the status and the dynamic of our relationship. So I think he probably would find it hard to read or didn't know that I felt it on that level because of his own emotional disconnectedness, my own unwillingness to take a step of courage and confront my dad. But I do think that he would be happy that at least I had the courage to express it, right? Because as you know, there's men out here having heart attacks, strokes. Nothing gets expressed. Nothing gets said. Nothing. So I think that he would probably try to say, it's because of him that I have these experiences and this knowledge and the ability to do this. I mean, it's so dynamic and layered.
As a son,
Yeah.
what lives in you through your father?
Oh, you know, one of my female friends told me when I was talking to her about my dad, she was like, wow, I wish my dad was my best friend.
Mm.
And I didn't know what to do with that. But I think what she was trying to say is best friends, they share everything, right? Um, and I think that we share so much. I mean, I was looking for one aspect of my life that isn't like my dad. And it's very hard to find that, be it writing, journaling, poetry, sometimes even how I laugh or, do certain things. It's like, man, it's like, how can you can't escape. You can't escape. So there's so much layered, there's so much overlapped with my dad. And I don't know how to, if this is my voice, if this is his voice. It's just a voice that I'm getting used to, and I'm still on the path to figuring out what's him, what's me. I'm questioning, I'm challenging, I'm having courage to, go deeper and, level up, and make sure that I live a life that I'm carving out for myself. Be it I'm taking what I liked that he had to offer, leaving what I don't, and trying to establish, my own voice through courage and perseverance and all that stuff.
Do you ever go back and read anything from the book?
Yeah, I do. I'm working on a project right now. I'm creating an audio experience. So as you know, in LA, our traffic is noteworthy. And
Same here in Toronto, my man. I feel you.
And people, especially I'm not going to generalize and say millennials, but a lot of people, due to work, family, they don't have time to sit and read in a book, but they do have a traffic commute, and they do have time to sit and, watch other cars. So I am reading it back now, and just the engineers in the studios, they've said, wow, it's very emotive. There's a lot of description. There's a lot of just soul, right? There's just a lot of times where you can feel what I feel. And I'm on chapter 4, reading it into a mic. And I said, wow, this guy, this little kid, this 7-year-old boy, he did it. He is fearless. He's stepping out in faith, and good luck to him. And I can at least appreciate, even if this book, as a journal entry, the goal wasn't for sales and all of this stuff, right? I never even thought I would be talking to someone like you on a video cast. However, I just reading it back, wow, I'm just like, man, you were serious. What else is in you that is going to be discovered?
Well, as we start to wind down here, and I appreciate this has been a very powerful conversation for me and the viewers, what message do you have for millennial men when it comes to the subject of father-son relationships?
I think that millennial men, we're in a position where we have technology, we have resources, we have people who are willing to have conversations. Yourself, Good Men Project. We have access to all of these resources. So I would say, don't wait till the end, to the deathbed, to reconcile whatever relationship that needs to be reconciled. I would say do it now. We're in a time to where there's just so many resources of how to do it, when to do it, the best way to do it. I would say consider forgiveness. I would say consider the best life or the opportunities that await you on the other side when you can just face what is already true. remember that it can't be erased. So let's start there. Everything you've experienced with your father, whatever, it can't be erased, but it also cannot be recreated. So what do you do with that information? So I would encourage them to use the resources, use the access to the resources to, level up if you want to. I'm learning now as an adult, not everybody wants to level up. Some people are comfortable, right, in their misery and pain. So for the people who do, use those resources, step out in courage. And I think that you owe yourself and you owe your journey just that autonomy, right? So this is views from the cockpit. Notice that you're flying, you're in control. There will be turbulence. There will be nosedives, but there will be times to where you can see the stars and the moon and everything clearer than you ever had. So know that there's resources, and don't be afraid, I guess. And that's something I tell myself too, right? So I have moments of fear that I have to overcome. Don't be afraid. There's resources. So that's something that I think we can all enjoy together.
Yeah, I think one of the things I share with people, sometimes you got to do it afraid.
Right. Yeah.
You got to do it afraid. On the other side of the spectrum, what is your message to the fathers of millennial?
Yeah.
Young
to young men, I would say to the fathers who may be a little bit stubborn. I mean, that's my interpretation, but maybe it's not stubborn. It's just, they're living based on their upbringing and backgrounds. But I would say, be the father that you wish you had. Be the father. I mean, and that's so big, right? Because I think that everyone falls into that. Be the father that you wish you had to your son. And I mean, he's going to be on his own journey of life and acceptance, but you can, at minimum, be the father that you wish that you had.
Good stuff. Quick story before we wind out.
Yes.
I work with a lot of fathers. Mm-hmm. And about 2.5 years ago, I was blessed enough to host a session with African Canadian fathers called Minding Our Minds. It was all about mental health and Black fatherhood. And 2 days before the event, we only had 3 registrations.
Wow.
For the actual event, we had 40 fathers show up.
Wow.
And I had my flip chart ready, and I like to gauge an environment, and sometimes, do things that are out that people don't expect. And I asked an interesting question. I asked, of the fathers there, how many had or have a good relationship with their father? And only 3 of them put up their hand.
Wow.
So for those who are watching this or listening to this live on the replay, there's a lot of sons out there that didn't have a good relationship with their father. And a lot of times we replicate what we emulate, we replicate what we emulate, or we emulate what we replicate. Sorry, put it that way. We emulate what we replicate. So a lot of times, if you see a man that's going through a hurting time or a challenging time, sometimes it may be because of the relationship he had or has with his father. I'll just leave it at that.
I agree.
Ross, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. If people want to touch base with you, how can they do that?
Yes, so I'm on all social media, very active on Instagram. So my handle there is Ross Victory Official. Also, my website, rossvictory.com. And I started an email recently to engage with people about the book, Views from the Cockpit book at gmail.com. And also on Facebook, just type my name in, Ross Victory.
Okay, fantastic. What's up next for you?
So for me, I'm going to work on completing this audio experience, which covers my grandma from the 1940s up to the present. We're going to have fun with music. We're going to have fun going around the world. So as I mentioned, I traveled a lot. My dad traveled a lot. He was a missionary. I joined him on some of these places, to China, to Costa Rica. So we're going to have fun with jungle sounds and Asian sounding music. So I'm working on that. And, I'm just going to continue to listen, I think. Continue to listen to my environment, people who care about me, someone who says, write a book, do this, listen, where's the energy? Where are the doors opening? Notice, watch. That's what I'm going to do my best to do. Keep writing, keep songwriting, keep doing my thing, and be humble, or try to be humble and open to life and the experience and the lessons that are trying to be taught.
One last conversation piece I have for you.
Yeah.
What has this experience of writing this book taught you or shown you about yourself that you did not know about yourself?
That I did not know. So it has shown me, wow, that I did not know. Oh man, that is, that I didn't know. So I really wish, and this is going to be on a more superficial level, I really wish that I could graphic design. And I mean, I have so many ideas, and it's so hard to even get anywhere close to this. And I think that writing should have images. So I really wish, that's something I did know, something I don't know. I may have to get back to. I mean, it just revealed maybe more clearly on the path that I should be taking. Like Ross, listen, write, anything that your mind comes to, just be willing to put in the time and the work. So I'm just trying to live in that truth and not have other people tell me, and keep listening. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. The book, he showed it there. It's also available on Amazon. The link for it I've put in the chat on the side here. Also on the replay post on the Dr. Vibe website, you'll get the link there, all his contact information. I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Innovation Award winner, handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. If you want to find out more about me, I'll keep it very simple. Go to my website, thedrvibeshow. You'll get all the information, podcasts, vidcasts, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc. Let's finish it off the way I always do. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider, and especially after this conversation, as much as possible, lead with love. I'd like to thank Luke and Brad and a few others that were watching this live on the Get Vocal platform. I'd like to thank, can't remember her name now, that was on Periscope, and a few other people.
Shannon?
No, I don't think it was Shannon. I can't remember her name, but that's all right. I can't remember, but I did mention it during our conversation. Thanks very much, everybody. If you can, follow me during whatever platforms. Please follow me and tell me what other conversations you'd like to have here, and also if there are people you'd like to have on here. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith and walk good.